Perfect.
Welcome back, Natalie, to the Highest Self podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me back. It's such an honor to talk to you again. I loved our first chat.
Yes, and so much has shifted since we last spoke, but I'd love to ask you again, what makes you your highest self?
Oh, yeah. What makes me my higher self is truly connecting to my own intuition, my own truth, and my own power. And I feel that with everything that we've been experiencing this year in 2020 and what we're being prepared for the future, my higher self is about really connecting to my own intuition so I can be in my truth and be in my power and knowing that it's so important to be in our sovereignty.
So beautiful. So you have really, I feel like shifted the core of your message from super focused on intuition, which it still is, but the deeper understanding of what is causing us to have these inclinations, to have these, cravings, desires, fears, etc., and realizing how much of it came from our ancestors. So can you share with us what was your realization around that?
Yeah, it was in my one-on-one client sessions where the themes and the patterns that were coming up for them, it was the realization that it wasn't just their themes and patterns, but it was their ancestors, and that for them to really heal in the present moment, which is what I'm, really guiding people towards, is like how you can use your intuition to heal the present moment. It means that you actually have to look back at this ancestral story and look back at their themes and their patterns and their blocks and the things that they faced. And once you begin to notice and see the repetition between what you're facing and what they faced, and then begin to heal from it, it's then that you truly begin to set yourself free. And we also have and hold a lot of ancestral shame around connecting to our intuition, from the patriarchy, from colonialism, and bringing that into the work as well. So it's really been about how we can use our gifts not to spiritually bypass, but to really go into the shadow parts of ourselves, our ancestors, and into the collective.
And I've noticed this shift in the collective, I think this year, because so much was activated for us around, the karmic wounds of the United States and what this country was built on. And then looking back into how that still very much affects the fabric of our society and our choices and or microaggressions and so many things today. And I think a lot of, especially people in the spiritual wellness community, woke up to the fact that it's not just about, okay, I'm going to feel good and like have my crystals and like do my thing and like just focus about myself. But it's really this like web of interconnectivity. And I'm seeing you speak so much more on social activism and just like how things that happened in the past can't be bypassed. So can you just speak more into that, especially for you, who is someone who is so intuitive and a person that one would not think, oh, they're going to definitely be a social activist. I feel like you really have been embodying what it looks like to be completely spiritual and completely aware of the atrocities that have happened on our planet.
Yeah, I mean, I like to call it conscious intuition, where it is the realization and the understanding that the change starts with us. And if we can create and embody the change with us, it then has a ripple out into, our communities and then into the wider collective as a whole. And also the understanding and the channeled the messages that are coming through from spirit that are like, spirituality and activism are connected. We have to be part of the change on the planet, and we can't see ourselves as separate from the pain and the suffering and the distortion that is there. We are part of it. We're humans on this planet, and there's so much of this kind of energy within the spiritual world of, let's focus on the love and light, or separate ourselves from the hate and the pain that is there, or even the bypassing of like, oh, I'm so sensitive, I can't put myself into that energy. And it's suddenly this realization of, no, we all have our part to play, and we all have a role to play. And that is so loud, for all parts of communities, especially the spiritual community. Like sometimes I have people commenting on posts on Instagram being like, why are you talking about politics? Why are you talking about social justice? And it's like, because it's part of our planet and we are all here living on this planet right now as intuitives. Let's do this. Let's be part of it.
So true. And I think that we feel like if we get into it, we're going to get lost in it. We're going to get sucked up into it. It's so dark. It's so deep. It's so shadowy. It's so aggressive. The energy in these activism spaces, it can be very aggressive. So I feel like a lot of people are feeling a bit jaded from it and feeling jaded from, well, I tried to help, it didn't work, so screw this. So what do you have to say to someone who's like, I tried to be involved, I tried to be in activism, but people were just mad at me, so I'm just going to focus on my own life? And also, is that even a problem?
Yeah. It's understanding. I think there is a level of people thinking, well, nothing changes, so why should I bother? There's a lot of like, hey, we all talk about, oh, let's change things, let's change the systems. And then there's this frustration, but it's bringing it back to, we all have different ways of showing up for the collective. For some people, that might be social activism of, going out onto the streets. It might be creating community events, but it's also that, like, well, how do I use my voice, like in your own personal way, whether it's within your families, whether it's in your communities, whether it's in like what you're creating and what your voice is. I think we get stuck on that social activism or has to look or feel a certain way, when it also it's the remembrance that it starts with you in the decisions that you consciously make on a day-to-day basis, from, hey, looking at your own white privilege and learning from Black educators and going, down that, path, and looking at your own racism. That is part of you showing up in the world and doing your bit for, social justice and relearning and re-educating yourself. So it's on so many different levels.
So true. And it's so, there's nuances and dualities in everything. And I think there's like the people who are so resistant to that. They don't want to do that. They don't want to feel wrong or low vibe or whatever. And then there are the people who also lose themselves in that. And I'm sure you've experienced people who lost touch with their intuition and ability to connect with their body because they think, oh my God, I must have been privileged this whole time and not been able to see things clearly. And then focusing on everyone else's voices and having them narrate their experiences, which might not have been true for them. So I'm seeing kind of like both sides, and it really does come back to knowing our own story, doing our own healing, because that is what will help us see, okay, this message is for me. This one might not be for me right now.
Yeah, and it's stepping into your own truth and using your intuition to step into your own truth. Hey, there is so much differing opinions. There is, the duality in the world of, what people are believing in. And in the end, what brings it all back to, it brings it back to, what is my truth? And using your own intuition and using your gifts to practice that discernment, to, reading into a social media post and actually tuning into the energy of that post, and asking yourself, like, is this aligned? Does this align with my values? Does this feel real? And using your intuition to tune into that. And if something doesn't sit right with you, don't just like go deeper than that. Go and research, like, who wrote the article? Where is it from? Like, we keep ourselves in this spiritual echo chamber as well within the spiritual community, where we kind of get looped around into kind of our community. And it's so important to get other perspectives and other viewpoints within that as well. But yeah, hey, there is, and that's why going over the next couple of years, because everyone's like, oh well, is this it just for 2020? No, like, this is going to be around for the next couple of years. There's going to be a lot more perceived chaos, and we're going to need our intuition to discover what our own truth is.
So true. So let's talk about healing our ancestral lineage. First of all, how do we become aware of what is coming from our ancestries, versus what might be from our childhoods or our past lives or the collective? I'm feeling like a lot of people are like confused, like, where's this shadow coming from? And does it matter?
Yeah. Oh, we're becoming so obsessed with labels.
Mm.
We want to know the details. We want to know the exact precise things. And with anything intuitive based, you got to get out of this sense of needing the logic. It's not, the intuitive voice isn't going to give you that logic all the time. Sometimes it is just a sense of knowing and stepping out of the spiritual labeling that we kind of get fixed into in our human ways. But the difference, um, so with the ancestral story, I mean, for me, it's part of this journey of, if you can, starting by actually asking your ancestors who are around you how, looking at the themes and the patterns that are coming up in your own personal life, and then going to ask the questions of your ancestors that are around. So we get stuck that our ancestors need to be like from generations and generations and generations ago, but our ancestors are our parents, they're our grandparents, they are our extended family and connected to them as well. And I also always say that if you're adopted, you can also ask your adoptive parents as well, and your adoptive family or caregivers, because you're taking on their stories as well from the upbringing that you've had with them. And actually starting by asking the questions like, what do you think your learning was from your childhood? What do you think your learning what is from this lifetime? What was your relationship to money growing up as a kid? What do you feel like your relationships were like? Did you move around a lot? Because a lot of the time when families have moved around or moved countries, that impacts the ancestor story on such a on a deep soul level that then impacts you, where you don't feel like you know where you belong, or you feel displaced, or you feel like you struggle to connect with people. So yeah, I always say, if you can, start with actually connecting to the ancestors that are currently around before you go deeper.
It's so funny because I feel like we romanticize our ancestors. We're like, oh, my ancestors are imagining these like beautiful like abuelitas who are like, we love you. But then our parents are like, oh, fuck that. I'm not talking to them. And it's like, they are our ancestors. They really are. And they're super triggering because, they're a living embodiment of the work that needs to be done. And if we try to avoid them and, oh, they're just crazy or they're just whatever, that's completely ignoring our ancestral story.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so interlinked. For me, when I started to really look at my own ancestor story and how, especially on, on both sides of my family, so doing it first, I did it first with my maternal line, and then I did it with the paternal, and separated it out because they both bring in very different things and different themes, and then seeing kind of the crossover between them was really powerful to witness. For me, on my mother's side, it was all about looking at motherhood and what it meant to be a mother, and just seeing how that's kind of trickled down through all the women in the family, and how it impacts so much was absolutely fascinating, but also provided such deep healing just by going there. So yeah, I encourage people to go and look at your ancestor story, but to also go really slow with it, because it can bring up a lot, especially with past traumas or things that have come up in your family line and lineage that you might not be ready to look at, or you think that you're ready to look at. But when you kind of start, peeling the layers back of, actually peeling the layers of the onion back, and getting to that root cause, it can bring up a lot into the central nervous system. So it's about being patient with yourself and being kind and going slow, and not feeling like you want to rush through it either.
So true. And for people who are like not sure how maybe their ancestral work shows up in their lives, what are some examples of how this shows up for us?
As in, just to confirm, like, do you mean like with how does the work as the actual ancestral work of how to kind of put it into action?
Like, how do they know that this issue they have in their lives is from an
Yeah.
ancestral thing?
Great question. For me, I would say it's when you can see the pattern, the theme that keeps recurring in your life, but you're not sure where it comes from. It's like, why do I feel unlovable? Why do I feel this deeper sense of abandonment? Why do I feel like I have this difficulty with my money story, and difficulty over self-worth and money, but I'm not sure where it comes from? For me, it's like then really unpacking and then going deeper into that. And you can, for me, I've created a Heal Your Ancestor Story workshop where you go on a guided meditation to go and meet your ancestors, and you go and receive the information from them around what was their pain, what was their suffering, and get that insight and downloads from them. And then you can then go back deeper than that to look at like the systemic problems that your ancestors face, the oppression that your ancestors face, or whether you were the oppressor, and how that then shows up as well. So yeah, it's multifaceted.
Yeah, for me, what happened this year was in March when coronavirus really began, and we had so much uncertainty around it. And my mom and my brother both got it. My dad is a 69-year-old diabetic, all the things. So I'm like, okay, well, he's probably going to get it because he's in the same house as them. So all the fears around, him dying and what would happen if he died, and then also a bit of like sadness and anger towards we did not have the ideal relationship that I wish we would have had. So then it brought me into looking at, well, why is that? And his anger or his inability to emotionally be there, which so many men did. Deeper than that, why was that? Well, his childhood, he never was shown that, he never received that. Well, what was his dad's childhood like? The same thing. He was on his own when he was 12 years old. And I realized that this problem that I so saw as like my personal problem of like me and my dad just aren't close was a very, very deep ancestral thing that in the entire lineage no one was close to their fathers. It wasn't a part of the culture. It's a very new and Western thing for the dad to like take you to soccer practice and always be there and like sit with you and talk to you about your problems. And I was actually thinking that there was something wrong with me for something that was not even part of my ancestry. So can you share how, maybe sometimes things like this could be showing up for people?
Yeah, it is really looking at the emotions of what it come, like really allowing yourself to go and unpack what the emotions that feel, yeah, that you need to feel in a way to go there to get to that point. But also that feeling of really that separation from your ancestors, of like, well, I feel so separated from them, like how do I connect, like how do I connect to my ancestors? What kind of practices do I have that can then bring me back closer to them so that I can unpack all of this that comes down, as well, massively. And a lot of people don't necessarily know what their ancestral lineage is. So if you're from a different country, or you have multi ethnicities in one family, it's like there can be a focus on one versus the other, and sometimes we need to reconnect into that in some way, whether it is looking at the stories not just within the family from those different sides, but also from the actual cultural stories, the cultural practices, the intuitive practices of that lineage and that ancestry as well, that bring you, creating an ancestor altar that is specific to the lineages that you want to call in and connect to. Dedicating meals to your ancestors allows you to really kind of reconnect to your ancestors on a whole new deeper level, so that you can then get to feel closer to them in a certain way, so that you can then unpack the emotional qualities.
Yes, I've noticed that a lot of people, and I love this practice so much, are opening up circles by speaking their mother and their grandmother's name to just invite the ancestors into the space. Or I think you did this in your book too, but to name the land that, the indigenous people of whatever land you're in, to also invite in the ancestors of the space that you were in. And I feel like this is going to be such a transformative practice to show us that we're not in this vacuum, we're not alone, but we're really this living extension of all of the people that came before us.
Yeah, and we're the descent, we're also the remembrance that we then become the ancestors, and then we're passing the knowledge on to the descendants. And that's also part of that conscious intuitive piece of like, how are we making the change in the now for our descendants? Like, how do we want to do it differently versus seeing it as this separation? I think we get stuck in this like time element, or the human time element, where it's like, well, really, if you think about it, we're kind of ancestors now already. If you break down on a time level, it's like, so if we're ancestors now already, well, shit, we got to start showing up in brand new ways, and doing, and doing it, and acknowledging the harm, the pain that has, that people have suffered on the planet, and being like, well, how can we do this differently? Because we've got to, right some wrongs, and re-educate and do things differently.
Yes, we are the living ancestors. And I think a lot of people have spoken about how, for example, if one person in the lineage acquires wealth, how much that impacts all of the generations after. But it's the same thing if one person awakens, how that impacts the lineages after, of from food choices to the education to everything. And we get to be those people right now who create that ripple in our lineages. So furthermore, maybe some traumas or unhealed patterns that have been passed on over and over and over again are stopped with us. And are you seeing that maybe right now a lot of us have chosen to incarnate in this lifetime to create that ripple?
Very much so. Yeah, the souls that are here, right? If you're here on this planet right now, it is for a reason. You are part of this change. And I know that can sound really overwhelming. It's like, oh shit, well, what have I got to do? Does that mean I have to do something differently? It's fascinating that we go into this like pressure to do, but actually you being you right now, and turn it, and showing up in your authentic truth and power, that's what it's about. In the end, it's about you being in your power. I think we get too hard, we can get too fixated that it needs to be these like big gestures or this big thing. But again, as you've mentioned about the ripple, and it's starting with us, if you can be in your most authentic, truthful state, that's enough. Like, that's more than enough. And by doing that in your family, you're not only healing, your ancestors that are still living, you're also healing the past generations that have come before you, and the future generations, all at the same time, energetically as well. And it's the same with reclaiming your own intuitive gifts right now. The amount of shame that our ancestors had from connecting to our intuition, the, making it out to be the devil's work, the witch trials, colonialism, taking indigenous practices away from groups, and is wild. And we're in this space where, when we reclaim our intuition in that way, it makes really big ripples.
And you just touched on something that I would love. I feel like you're the perfect person to dive deeper into this. So, we hear a lot that the work that we do right now is going to have an effect on 7 generations after us and 7 generations before us. So, a lot of people might think, well, how is the work I'm doing right now healing my ancestors who've already died? Can you speak more into this?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to know how they put a number on 7. I would, I'm like, hey,
8, no, you're still screwed, but 7,
8,
you're
no, sorry,
good.
you got to wait a generation. You got
Yeah.
to wait. I mean, I honestly feel like, again, it's that human label. We need to label exactly how many generations. Like, hey, if energy is all, if moves across all time and space, it means it's kind of infinite. No, no. So yeah, it is that energy of like the focus on time, of that ripple, that energetic ripple, where there is technically, no time and space, and time is just a linear, is that linear element. So the healing that you're doing now, it does move all through, time and space. Hey, if you're a Christopher Nolan movie fan, look at Interstellar, look at his movies, he describes it, shows it so beautifully. But yeah, it's important for us to trust that we are making changes in the present. I think we don't trust ourselves that we can impact the past and the present and the future. I think we're so used to kind of not seeing ourselves as powerful beings, or really believing in our own energy and power of healing that we have within us, that sometimes those concepts of healing past generations and future generations doesn't seem possible or feasible. And I think that's also what's happening right now, and the shift that's happening, where we are realizing, oh yeah, I am more powerful than I realized. And not in a powerful, like, power can be used as such a distorted word. Of course, there's, again, imbalance power is, it's a beautiful thing to witness when when it's used in all the right ways and within that balance.
Yes. And I see it also how we are our ancestors' living dreams, and, the things that they sacrificed for or wished for, or one day, didn't even think were possible. We are already the living embodiment of it. The fact that women can vote, the fact that Black and white people can be in the same restaurant, like, these are things that our ancestors wished for and dreamed for, one day before. So us just being able to embody that sense of freedom and joy and sovereignty in itself it's healing our ancestors. Because imagine if the very things that you are wishing for right now, to know that one day they would be solved: global peace, unity, no more of this chaos, but more of this integrated community. Our descendants are going to complete that. So it makes all of this work worth it.
Yeah, and knowing that it's already, and believing that it's possible, like really seeing that it's possible. And it's interesting, as you were talking about that, it's also realizing, and this is another way you can see the ancestral healing happening for you, is where you're finishing off things that your ancestors or your people in your family didn't get to complete. Like, you're finishing off the dreams or the future visions that they had. So for example, I know I'm finishing a lot of my grandfather's future visions. It's wild. Like, I have, his family used to live in a place called Wales. He hated Wales. He absolutely, it had so much pain and suffering for him. I moved there in my early 20s and had an amazing time and did the ancestral healing that was part of that. He moved his family, moved my mom and everyone to Montreal in Canada in the late 50s, early 60s, and ended up, like, his dream was, to not be in the UK and to have his family there. They ended up going back to the UK, but it's fascinating that here I am, I found myself, wanting to move to Canada, of all places. So just notice, if for anyone that's listening, you can also go back and look at your own life. And if you know of some of the things that your family members did in their life but didn't get to complete or finish, or healing that needed to happen in specific places in the world, or certain situations, or jobs careers that you ended up pursuing, but you then realize, like, oh my God, that was what my grandfather really wished to do, or that was already really what my grandmother wanted to do. Like, it can show up like that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think all of us are doing that for multiple people in our lineages. I know for myself, my great 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 grandmother, who was actually, my grandmother knew her because they were all like young teenagers when they would have children, but she always loved wellness and would talk about, like, oh, this food's good for you, that food's good for you, and like that kind of thing. But she never, got to go to school, so she was illiterate. She never got to learn how to read books, and then she ended up having like a bunch of daughters and one son, and that was her pride. And then the son, when he was like 18 or something, died. So her whole life was basically that she never got to live her dreams. She never got to share, her passion for wellness, read a book. And this one thing that she was proud of, having a son, was taken away from her. And she actually had a lot of pain and sadness and just suffering in her life and in her energy. And I actually had a session with someone who, sort of like an ancestral channel, and she brought up this specific person in my lineage. So I asked my grandmother about her, and she ended up telling me this story. So I started to kind of take my meditations and offering them to her and showing her, hey, I've written books now on these things, and I have a healthy relationship, and showing her, like, it's okay, and everything that you've experienced, so it was not fair and it was not right. In a way, it created this healing that happens now, so it can come into a place of peace.
Oh, that's so powerful. Like, seriously, like, so powerful. And I love when ancestors come through in client sessions and they appear and they want to give the messages of, yeah, this happened in my life, or yeah, this is why you're feeling this pain. It was my pain as well, but you're ready to move through it. You're ready to heal from it, and getting that validation from the ancestors that you're ready to move on, and heal from it too, is, yeah, it's deeply transformational.
Do you have any tips for people who are kind of wanting to channel for themselves, maybe a specific ancestor that this could be coming from?
Yeah, the hey, we're all mediums. We can all connect to our ancestors. It's really important to remember that. I use a really simple tool which I call the golden bridge, and you basically imagine yourself on one side of a golden bridge, it's like a light golden bridge, and you set the intention of the person that you wish to call forward, and you imagine their energy walking across the bridge towards you, and you imagine yourself walking across to them, and you meet in the middle of the bridge. You connect the energy, breathe it all the way into your body. You can even visualize them reaching out and putting their hand on your heart, and you reaching out and putting your hand into their heart space, and to feel the connection of the energy. And then ask them, like, what's the message? Actually communicate with them. Sometimes we get to that point and we're like waiting for them to interact with us, but I'm a really big believer of like you interacting with them and asking the questions, or um asking like, what do I need to know today, or show me something that was important to you. And if it's a loved one that that you also want to connect to, yeah, like recalling those memories, or asking to be shown those memories or those smells or the things that remind you about that person, if you can recall that, also really helps with the connection.
So beautiful. I love that practice. Definitely going to do that. So, now, a lot of people have shame over what their ancestors did, and that's preventing them from connecting to them because they think, for example, my grandfather forced my grandmother into a child marriage. I was, my whole life, like, he's a bad person, right? So why would I want to connect with him? And a lot of people, especially people who come from white lineages, feel like my ancestors had slaves or, colonized another country. They're bad people. I don't want to connect with them. How can we overcome this feeling of shame and guilt?
Yeah. Firstly, we always have a choice of who we connect to. So if an ancestor comes through and you don't want to talk to them, like a family member that has, done wrong the family, or you didn't have a connection to, and you're not ready to connect to them, you can just ask them to leave, or make that conscious choice of not connecting to them, because it's always really important to remember that you're in charge, you're in control. The ancestor is in charge of kind of infiltrating your energetic space to connect. So I would say that's like the first thing, before kind of, yeah, delving into the shame of, of what's happened. I think before connecting to an ancestor that you do have shame or guilt around, acknowledge it. Like, write it down. Go and write down how it makes you feel before you want to connect with them in a certain way. I think it's part of that non-spiritual bypassing, where it is really important to acknowledge the pain that that person, of what they caused and what they suffered. Whether they were the oppressed or the oppressor. And knowing that, also I also share that you don't have to do it alone, as in, it can be when we kind of go into these depths, to look at the shame and to look at the guilt, it's sometimes having the support of a therapist or someone that's around you as well can also really help you on this journey of doing it. But it's acknowledging the emotions that are coming up for you, and also knowing that releasing the shame and the guilt, like, that's part of the healing. Like, in the end, that's part of healing the ancestor story, is facing your shame, facing your guilt. That's part of the not spiritual bypassing. And if it feels uncomfortable and you feel like you're in a safe place to do it, lean into it, face it, see what comes up, because it is part of the healing.
And I know what helped me specifically with that in my lineage was he didn't know better. that was the time, that was normal, you know? And it's like sometimes now we have this awareness of like, of course you don't marry someone who's 20 years younger than you and like 12 years old, you know, that's crazy. But back then, that's what everyone around them did. So in a way, like at least with this situation, he was doing what he saw was the next step to do as a man. So when I was able to see it in that context versus instead of him being a villain versus he not a victim of the society, because I think another big thing that I've also learned from family constellation is like no one was a victim. You don't have to feel bad for them, because when it started for me with the ancestral thing, I start to feel so bad for everyone. I'm like, I feel so bad, why didn't they have the chance? Why? And it's like, no, that was their life, and you don't need to feel sorry about it either, because that's the other side. That's just what happened, and I accept that that's what happened and make peace with it, and then see what lessons it has for me moving forward.
Yeah, very much so. It's important not to go into, as you say, labeling them as victims and then getting into that like emotional hook or that energy hook into that, because that isn't part of necessarily as part of the healing that really wants to go down. And sometimes ancestors also do step forward in a way to do the healing, to apologize, to say sorry, to, they can show up as their higher self, their more evolved self, to say, I acknowledge what I did was wrong, I understand, and and I want you to know that. So that can come through as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's, yeah, times it's so crazy to realize how much society can normalize such a horrible, toxic behavior. Slavery, that was, yeah, for some reason, didn't strike anyone that this is extremely wrong. And also, even today, we're going to look back and be like, how did people allow sweatshops to be up? They knew about it, but they didn't do anything. How did people know that there were, concentration camps of Muslims in China and they didn't really do much about it? And it's like, even right now, there are still so many things that we're going to look back on and wonder how it was okay. So we have to understand that this is just the cycle. And with this descent of consciousness that happened in our modern couple thousand of years, like some things were just out of alignment because the norm energetically for everyone was to kind of like not have this language of intuition and awareness.
Yeah, and now it's like we can't turn a blind eye. We actually can't. We're at a crux in our society right now. Hey, I've been describing it as, the spiritual reactivation of the collective. We have to look at those shadow parts. We have to go deeper, and we have to see that what we've labeled as normal, acceptable, or oh, that's just how society works, or oh, that's just how the system is, and being like, well, who said that? Like, who made it like that? Why can't it be changed? And so it's again, everyone's like, oh, well, you can't change the systems. It's like, well,
They've
we have,
always changed. Yeah.
yeah, it's like we have to, the world and the planet is going to be, that perceived chaos on the exterior that's coming up is going to have to make those changes to the systems happen. It's like, you can't live like this anymore. Like, will you acknowledge that as humans and change it?
Exactly. So, on the other end, there are a lot of people who feel very angry about what happened to their ancestors, people who have been oppressed, enslaved, indigenous practices taken away from them, land taken away from them. How can we release and not be so taken by this anger that it's preventing us from, really living our dharmas?
Great question. Hey, and I'm a white woman commenting on that, so I just want to acknowledge that this is a white woman's perception of that, as well, and my answer towards it. I actually feel that the anger and the righteous anger and the righteous rage is actually really important. We're so suppressed into thinking that anger is not a shadow, is a shadow part of ourselves that we shouldn't be using or we shouldn't harness. And I think that when our anger is energetically harnessed in the right way, it is powerful, and it is part of that change. So if you are experiencing anger coming up as you're looking at the ancestral work, or you're looking at what is happening in the collective, and the oppression that you are currently experiencing, have previously experienced, and that your ancestors have experienced. It's about acknowledging the anger, and finding the balance of not letting it eat you up completely. And hey, we all have days where that happens as well, and allowing that to happen. We put so much pressure on ourselves to feel our emotions so perfectly, but it's about finding the balance with the anger, and harnessing it to create the change, but also harnessing the anger as part of the healing process.
Yes, I think this year definitely has shown us that our anger is sacred and just, and in so many situations, it warranted and makes sense and is natural. And we have repressed it for so long and made it wrong. And that collective roar really needs to be heard, and has been heard. And also, what I've recognized is some people naturally, like, anger is a core emotion that they are supposed to run with. Like some women, they have this like beautiful anger, and that's the energy in which they create change and transformation from. It's like that mama bear, like Durga, Kali Ma energy, and like that is part of them. And then for some other people who have maybe a more kapha energy, etc., it can feel very overwhelming for their energy body. And then when they're around it or step into it, they might let go of their self-care, let go of everything. So it's kind of finding like how much of that pitta energy, that fire energy, does your body want to hold. Some bodies, like, they need a little bit of that fire to keep going, and others are like completely overwhelmed, can't work, can't move forward, and then they're no longer able to be of service with it.
Yeah, and I like to use it as a practice. It's about practicing the energetic self-sovereignty around it. So really connecting to your own energy and knowing that it's okay to take a break. It's about understanding and working out what is my energy. Am I taking on the energy of the collective? Is this energy mine? Is this anger mine, or have I just taken this on because I've just read it in a social media post? It's about really listening to your own energetic, intuitive body, and finding the balance from it, but also knowing and learning how to shield yourself as well. So again, it's that balance of feeling the anger, and not spiritually bypassing, but also knowing that you're in charge of your own energetic body.
So true. Yeah, I noticed for myself, also very activist in the space. But after the month of June, I was so exhausted, so exhausted from trying to keep up with everyone's opinion and this and that, that it got to a point that it was taking me out of my energetic sovereignty. So I was like, okay, I need to put a Instagram timer on, even delete Instagram on the weekends and have space from that so I can tap into, okay, how can I, with my gifts, best actually solve this, versus trying to get so caught up into like what everyone's thinking and doing that I'm like not even able to be of service. And there's no purpose of that. It's not like to just have knowledge of all things and take no action. It's how can I actually take action in the few things that I truly can make a change in.
Yeah, and it being authentic, and it being in your authentic truth and your authentic power, and knowing and trusting that you can't be everything for everybody, and you also can't also know every single piece of information out there. Yes, you can be informed and you can remain educated, but it's taking the pressure off ourselves to be perfect, because we're not perfect, and we're never going to always get it right in this space either. And but really listening to how your body feels, and listening to the intuition of do I take action on this, do I take a pause on this, is this aligned for me, is this how does this feel in my body? Because we don't take a moment to really tune into what our intuitive body is telling us. We get stuck into the mind, and the mind goes into overdrive, the ego voice, the fear voice, and it's about really learning in this time, as the world changes, to really step into listening to the intuition.
So true. So I want to speak a little bit more about how can we know if we are picking up on someone else's energy or not? How do we know if it's the collective or our own?
Great question. So often people say to me, I don't even know what my own energy is. And that's wild when you think about it, where you're like, I don't even know what my own body really, truly feels like. With the energetic sovereignty, I mean, I share a lot about it in the book, but briefly, a great way to work out whether energy is yours or not. Um, if you have a change of emotions really quickly, so it's a lot of the time it can come in really fast. So say, for example, you were having a really great day and then all of a sudden you feel like you've picked up some anxiety or some fear or some anger that doesn't feel like yours all of a sudden. It can feel, you can suddenly feel not right in your own body. You might also begin to feel pain in a certain part of your body that's not yours. So, for example, hey, and I do this in client sessions, I know when someone's knee hurts or their neck hurts because I start feeling it in my own body. It's the same for when you're around certain people, friends, family members, communities, and also online. You don't have to be in person with people to take on their energy in your own body. It comes through, you know, your your Zoom calls that you're doing for work.
That's so
Groups
true.
you're
Comes through the
attending.
Instagram feed.
It does come through the Instagram feed. And
Yeah.
so it is then about noticing how it makes you feel. And also, we're talking about social media, knowing that energy when you get hooked in energetically and it suddenly becomes addictive. Like you can't stop scrolling. Like, you know, you're done, but your energy is like hooked into the, you know, oh my gosh, I've got to read this latest thing on COVID, or I've got to read this latest thing on the masks, or I've got to read the latest thing on politics. Just notice how it's taking, you know, you out of your own energy as well. And giving yourself that permission to have a break is so key.
Mm. I catch myself in that sometimes I'm scrolling and I know I don't want to be, but I just keep doing it and I keep doing it. And it's almost like then I like sometimes will be like watching like a TikTok video or something. And I'm like, okay, this is the last video I'm watching. Like once this is done, it's the last one. But something in me keeps going. Like, how can we stop ourselves from getting in this social media trance?
Yeah, have you watched The Social Dilemma?
I did, yes.
Oh my gosh. Like, hey, it's designed. Hello, when are we going to wait? It's like it has been designed for us to do this. Like, truly, it has been designed. Um, for me, when that happens, it is, well, instantly noticing how it's changing your body, noticing how it's changing your emotions, using your intuition to trust what what you're reading, whether it feels good, creating that energetic self-sovereignty from the social media. As you said earlier, I'm a big fan of deleting apps at the weekend, like, or just deleting them from your phone completely and only accessing them via the browser. It is a change of routine. And also, you know, conscious social media. It is about, yeah, just following what feels good and deleting and unfollowing the things that don't. And yeah, and I mean, it's so multifaceted, but just giving yourself permission to know that you're in charge of your energy, of what you let in through
Mm.
social media. Like, it's the same with intuition. Like, you're in charge of the spirits and everything that come into your sphere. It's the same with social media, and you remembering that you're in charge. You're in charge. You have sovereignty over it. Not, it doesn't, you know, you're not in, it doesn't rule you.
Exactly. And I think that's that dangerous thing with social media. You don't control what you are consuming. Like if I read a book, I am choosing to read those words on the page. Whereas with social media, it's choosing for me. And I noticed, for example, with TikTok, where you really have no choice because it's this for you page of a bunch of people you don't follow, of videos that just happen to be going viral at the time. And there is this trend of people sharing their deepest traumas. And it's like this release for them, right? And, you know, I'm sure for them it feels great on some level to release it, but then it's millions of us just taking that in. And then I would catch myself afterwards, like just thinking about it and a bit scarred from it. And I'm like, wow, now I'm picking up on their lifelong deepest secret. I don't even know what this person's name is. I'm never going to even be able to find their profile again. And now for the next couple days, I'm sitting with this thing.
I deleted TikTok for that reason. I was just, it was, I'm, and I'm energetically sensitive. It means that I'm not going to look at things. I feel like we can use that as an excuse to not, go there and, see the shadow parts of the collective. But yeah, it can be, as you say, it's the feed of, what's coming through. And as the social dilemma said, they're also feeding things into the profile. Like, we're not in charge of it as much as we think, oh yeah, I'm following this person and this is the content. Like, they're, shifting the order of it and how it flows, and the adverts that we're seeing. And just really, for me, this year has also really brought up around really being aware of energetically what TV and films I'm watching, and knowing and just noticing how it affects your energy after watching something, and whether it sits with you or whether the themes of what you've just watched have like reappear in your dreams or give you nightmares or give you like not the best dreams. And really being conscious around everything that we're consuming, because it is all energy. It does have an emotional quality. It is there to impact us, and so being conscious about that.
Absolutely. I can't watch, scary movies or thrillers or even action or I can't watch most things because it ends up stuck in my subconscious. And then, it does create your subtle energy. And then you will manifest more violence in your life, more drama in your life, more affairs. And even though when you're watching it, like my husband, he's like, but I love the cinematography of it and the acting. And like, he used to work in film. So he's like seeing it from this like different perspective. I'm like, but it's still, you might consciously be like, oh yeah, I like the acting in it, but you're still in it. You're still having a physical reaction in your body. You're bought into it. So your body doesn't know the difference, right? And then it's like getting a bit of stimulation from that thing. It's like a hit, a hit, a hit. And then you're going to start to subconsciously seek whatever that hit is, whether it's the cheating and the drama from reality TV or the horror or the violence or the guns or whatever it is that they're feeding to you. There's something in your subconscious that wants more and more and more of that. And for some people, it's like a drug that they have to completely wean themselves off of.
Yeah, I was watching a couple of months ago. I was like, oh, there's this like Penny Dreadful TV show. I'll admit, I love TV shows. I used to work in film. I love films. I love movies. They're part of like how I decompress, and and step into the creative flow as well. But I started watching this show, and I started to notice it had a really big impact, to a point where I actually got intuitive messages from my guides who stepped forward and were like, you need to stop watching that show. The energetic resonance and the quality of it isn't serving you. Please stop. And I noticed such a difference in stopping. I watched 3 or 4 episodes, and I noticed the difference in my body from stopping watching it.
And they create these hooks at the end too, that you can't just stop at 1 or 2 episodes. You have to watch the whole season, and it becomes this like binge. And it's like, we're sharing this with you because this is what affects your intuition, right? People say, I want to be more intuitive, but then they're watching these things or they're unconsciously scrolling. And, sometimes we also say, I know for myself, oh, well, I'm only following spiritual people. So it's basically, I used to tell myself, I'm basically flipping through a tarot card on my social media field because everyone's so inspiring. And it's like, no, that's not really the same thing.
No, it's it can still come through. Again, if you're only following spiritual accounts, you're tuning into the energy of every spiritual person that is sharing it. And it's also being really aware that, oh, does this person that I'm following, does it take me closer towards my truth or away from my truth? Because sometimes we can, we see spiritual leaders and we think, oh, well, everyone's following them, so they must be right. Or yeah, or oh, I should, I should learn from that person, versus really tuning into your own intuition and being like, oh, I'm going to I'm going to question what this person is sharing, and also really listening to your own intuition, whether you actually even want to follow that person, is so important. And that's when I'm talking about any of my work that I share, I'm like, take what you like, leave what you don't, tune into your own intuition, take what you resonate with and leave the rest behind. Don't try and force things just because I'm saying like, hey, connect to your ancestors this way, or hey, connect to your spirit team this way. discover, like, discover what works for you. It's so important.
For sure. I think it's like we're all sharing what's working for us at this point of time. If you even go back for myself too, if I go back to what I'm sharing 3 years ago, it's so not what I need right now, you know? So it's like also everyone is a human and everyone's going through change. And on the flip side of that, since we're in all the dualities, it's also if someone shares something that you don't like or you don't agree with, it doesn't mean they're like this horrible person. I'm seeing people so quick to judge, to cancel, to I don't agree with this one political view you have, so I hate you and you must be a fraud and refund me on all your courses or like whatever it is. We're seeing this happen with so many people, and it's like you're not going to agree. It's like you have your perspective based off of your ancestry, your past lives, your life experience, your childhood, your DNA, your all the things. If I had all of the same as you, I would think exactly like you do, right? So it's like we're mad at someone for not having the same experiences as we did. In a way, that's the most privileged perspective that we could ever have.
Yeah, and understanding that we are all unique, and getting uncomfortable with having a different opinion from someone. It's part of learning, it's part of change, it's part of re-education. Being uncomfortable in someone's differing opinions makes you then realize what is your own truth. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that was my truth on that topic, because actually someone's just shared that and it's triggered my whole emotional body, and it's making me angry, it's making me feel anxious, it's making me feel frustrated, it's making me feel like I want to say something. Awesome, great. It's making you realize what your own truth is. But then it's about like not like using your energy and to cause harm off the back of that. It's about, how can you, how can you be in your own truth and sit with the uncomfortableness.
And even bringing it back to the ancestors, if one is having that type of reaction to what someone posts of like complete anger and they're wrong and they're a fraud and there's probably something ancestral happening there for yourself of like maybe it's authority, if something about authority that's happened in your ancestral or your life or any sort of life, or maybe it's something about like news or news not being true or something like that deeper that's happening. It's very less likely for it to actually be about the message that that person shared and more likely for it to be around what it triggered inside of you that still needs to be looked at.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, on so many levels. Yeah, and cultural appropriation. I know for in the spiritual community, when things around cultural appropriation come up, it can be a really big triggering topic for people to look at, within the space as well. And just seeing it's like, oh, why am I being triggered by these conversations around, the cultural appropriation of spiritual practices? It's like, oh, maybe I should need to go and actually look at my own ancestry and look at the appropriation that my ancestors have caused, because it's coming from that place as well.
Right. And even that conversation of cultural appropriation, I've had it with this beautiful shaman on the podcast and this Vedic counselor. And it was pretty interesting because I wanted to ask them, because they're someone who, would definitely be a figure in their lineage. And both of them said something similar, which was, it really comes down to whether you're willing to honor and learn from that lineage more so than it's about if you happen to in this lifetime be born from it. Because if in all of these lineages, they believe in past lives, right? And we've been speaking about that. So who are we to know that that person was not Indian in their past life? Or who are we to not know that that person was a medicine woman in their past life? This is actually what that very lineage says. However, in this life, for some reason, you've chosen to incarnate in whatever racial ancestry that you were born into. And there are still living people who were born into that ancestry. So it's still learning from them, honoring where it came from. But I do believe that it is possible to study shamanism if you are from a different culture, as long as you're truly being a student of the work first.
Yeah, and not bypassing, oh, it was a past life, and so now that gives me the right. As you say, it's about learning in the present. It's about educating yourself in the present and being invited in from those different cultures and practices, so that you can embody it in your own current practice.
Yes, I think that this topic is going to be such such a huge one moving forward and finding our way around things, especially as our world continues to become more globalized and we're learning from each other and things are like being watered down, and like what that really means. And it is, we are moving into more of the water energy, so looking at both the light and the shadow of that. So it's all pretty fascinating. So before you leave, I want to ask you this question, because a lot of people are considering moving right now, relocating. I know you are too. What are you seeing around relocation for people?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I really feel like we're being prepared for the next phase and the next things that are coming down. And we're getting prepared to be like, well, where do I want to be? Where do I want to be and who do I want to be with? And really listening to that intuition of where you're being called in the country and across the world. I know, this isn't just happening across the US, it's happening everywhere, where everyone is like, where do I want to migrate to? What does this look like? And trusting that intuition. We're going to be facing some, environmental change, systemic change, political change. And so we're really tuning into where our intuitive bodies want to be based. Where do we want to be anchored? What land do we want to be in? Which particular qualities of that land do we want to be in, so that we can create that sovereignty and be in our power still and be able to anchor in? And so trust what's coming up for you. If you're feeling called to move, even if it doesn't make sense, but you keep getting the intuitive hit, do it, listen to it. I know, oh my gosh, nearly all of my one-on-one clients, lots of my one-on-one client sessions, my group sessions, the chat around moving is wild. It's fascinating. And yeah, trust it, because the global migration that is happening, the numbers, yeah, it's all for a reason. So yeah, trust your intuition of what's coming up.
And I love how you said that, because now really is the time that we get to ask ourselves, what elements do I need to be around that really help me? That, for yourself, I know you're moving to the mountains and the lakes. So, for example, what called you to that type of environment?
Great question. It was just the energy of being held. I wanted to be held, and the mountain energy it allows me to feel held in a different way by Mother Earth, and needing, hey, I've lived by the ocean for a while, like I'm a water baby, but needing the water in a different form, needing it to be water held in a lake, or to be near the rivers, the moving rivers, versus it being the large ocean. That's, yeah, what I was really intuitively called to. But also being really transparent. I know a lot of people, like, I don't know where I should move, and I've been moving around as well the last couple of months, and being like, do you know what, I'm gonna move here for a little bit, and I'm gonna move there for a little bit, and trusting what energy wants to come through for those months, and then moving it, and then moving. And I know that's a really privileged thing to say, that I can, with having an online business, that I can move around and have that freedom and flexibility of, no partner and no kids as well. But yeah, really tuning into what the energy that is coming through just feels really key.
I love that feeling of being held, and definitely looking at the earth as, a friend and an ally. And we get to call her in of like, what do I need? Expansiveness? Do I need, vast deserts? Do I need the ocean, purification, and letting that be your guide? I think that's so beautiful. And of course, I know for myself at the beginning, since March, I think I've been telling you, I'm like, I want to move, Natalie. But my husband was very like, LA till I die, because of the music industry here. But then even that is, in a way transitioning. So it finally opened it up. But I know the stress for people listening of like, I want to move to XYZ, but my partner doesn't want to, or I have my kids, and like how hard and challenging that tug of war game can feel. But I would say to them, just still don't give up completely. You might find a really good compromise of somewhere that maybe feels like that place that you want to live. For example, my first place was like, I want to go to Bali, and that's just not possible because Bali is not allowing Americans in. So I started to ask myself, what do I love about Bali? Okay, I love that I can dance there, be around, a tropical jungle environment. there's an ocean there, there's culture there, etc. How can I create that in the US? For me, that was Miami. That was the closest thing that I could get to that Bali feel. And that ended up working for my husband too. But then also having that conversation of, well, when Bali opens, we're going to go and, spend some time there. But that to me, it still feels like I'm moving closer towards, where I want to go. So for anyone listening who's like, yeah, I can't move to Morocco next week, but what do you love about Morocco? Is it getting lost in the markets? Okay, maybe that's Sedona, Arizona, or like New Mexico, or somewhere that doesn't have to feel so far away.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Like, looking at those qualities and finding those energetic qualities in a different, in a different place that feels more accessible. And also knowing that if you can't move and you are feeling cool, just knowing it is about, accessing Mother Nature in a way that you can, to feel grounded and connected to your intuition. I talk about a lot around, working with nature to connect to your intuition. And it can be from, hey, if you're in a big city and you can't move, like, get to your local park, find the green spaces, find those natural elements and those qualities so that you can anchor in, because the mother nature, the natural element is going to be really important for us to anchor in when there's going to be a lot more perceived chaos coming down the pipeline.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And for those people who maybe don't feel like moving, don't also feel the peer pressure. Oh, well, everyone else is thinking about moving. So like, should I be moving too? Is there something they know that I don't know? I know for myself, especially in the beginning of this, I got into fear state of like, am I going to be safe? Safety being an ancestral issue in my life from, migration, etc. So knowing that no matter where you are, you will be safe. You will be safe and you will be protected. This is just an opportunity for us in the midst of this like chaos to also kind of, I imagine like the dust coming up from over the rug, so that dust has a chance to move if it wants to. But I know some people who are like, I love LA and it has changed me so much and it's so part of my core identity, and no matter what happens, I actually want to be here to help elevate the consciousness of whatever happens. And that's such a beautiful thing too, because we're being called to be wherever we need to be, and for some people that's exactly where they are.
Yeah, listen to the intuition, follow the path that feels aligned, and yeah, keep in your own truth of where you want to be.
I love that. So thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and your knowledge and your insights with us. So where can listeners pick up your new book, You're Intuitive, and connect with you further?
Yeah, you can get the book at youareintuitive.com. I'm on Instagram. I am Natalie Miles, and I also have a new community coming up. So yeah, you can find out on all the information on those sites as well.
Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Oh, thank you.